The story continues when Jun encounters Seung-soo in his kitchen. Seung was acting weirdly, accusing Jun of killing him to become a gangster. He knew about him having died once and called him a murderer. Jun tries to convince himself that it is just a dream and tries to wake up. But he didn't wake up. Just then, Seung transforms into a demon and attacks him while yelling he will have his revenge. Jun wakes up from the sleep and wonders what kind of crappy dream it was. Just then, he got a call from the English teacher, who asked him why he didn't attend school today. He looks at the clock and curses Seung for being late to the school. He runs to the school while cursing Seung the whole time. He arrives at the class and asks them if the first class is already over, but they look at him differently than usual. The bullies of the class apologize to him as well and accept their mistakes. They tell him how it was Yonggi who was forcing them to do all that. Jun already knew that was the case, but when he thinks about it, he realizes that he has become the strongest student in the school after defeating Yonggi. That's why everyone was looking at him weirdly. But he doesn't feel anything special. If it was his past self, he'd be showing this off all day. He smacks the both of them in the head, saying he'd be watching them all the time. And he also told them to go and apologize to Jae-hee as well. He wondered where Jae-hee was anyway. He sees the girl surrounding her, asking her about her hair and makeup and all. She was nervous. Jun gets annoyed at her for being nervous even after he did all that for her. But he smiled while reading that she wasn't exactly the same. Just then, the guys told him that Dean was looking for him and had called for him in the office. But it wasn't actually Dean who called him. It was just the English teacher who called him here because he was late, to ask him if everything was all right. During lunch, Jun thinks to himself how there were merits for being kind. Due to coming to school in a rush, he forgot his lunch. Jae-hee offers to eat together. At first, he denies it, saying he wasn't a beggar. It was until he saw what was inside the lunchbox. He acted as if he was only eating because she was insisting. Just then, a girl accuses Jae-hee of trying to get him with lunches, and also how she was doing all sorts of things to have him. She congratulates Jun for becoming Sampo High's strongest student and wants to have a chat with him. He still didn't know who she was. Last time, he went along because she acted as if they knew each other, but he had no idea who she was. Jae-hee calls her by name Yunjeng. This rang a bell to Jun, and he was surprised to know she went to the same high school. He asked her if her name is Yunjeng. She thinks he is acting as if he doesn't know her. He tells her to F off to her face, saying he isn't going to get involved with a delinquent like her. He starts minding his own business while she just stands there stunned. She gets furious and taunts him, saying he only likes someone like her who was possessed by a ghost but not her, and that he deserved only that, and hopes the two of them work this out. Jun didn't have a clue what nonsense she was spouting and asked her what was she talking about. She mocked him for not knowing and told him that Jae-hee's mother was a shaman, and apparently, she left home because she was possessed by a ghost. He didn't know about that and looked at her with a surprised look, while she was trying to hold back her tears. Jun realizes this was the reason she didn't want to get back home early. He asked her if that was it. Yoon continues to spout on how possessed girls couldn't stand on their own, and they needed a man on their side all the time, as she was belittling him for falling for someone like her. Jun slaps her out of nowhere. She couldn't believe what just happened. Everyone in the lunch hall was shocked as well. He remarked how a possessed and kind ghost would be far better than someone like her. She was irredeemable. In anger, she tries to hit him back, but he grabs her hand, saying he wouldn't let himself get hit by a lowlife like her. She threatens to kill him and asks him if he even knew who she was, to which he replies that of course, he knew. Her father was a gangster in the White Tiger Skull gang. She told him to get on his knees and apologize to her if he wanted to live. But Jun laughs at her, saying he doesn't care if her father is a gangster. He asked her if she expected him to tremble in fear like others, and that she shouldn't have messed with her. Then he goes on to announce the strongest in the Sump High. He ordered that from now on that girl was an official outcast, and if he saw anyone with her, he'd kill them himself. He assured them that they shouldn't try him as he really effing meant it. Everyone was shocked to hear that, and the one who was shocked the most was Yunjeng herself. After a few moments in the schoolyard, Jae-hee said to Jun that he was a bit harsh on Yunjeng earlier. Jun calls her an idiot for worrying about people like her. Then he asked her if she was the one who bullied her in middle school as well. She asked him how he knew about that. He found out when he saw her freeze in front of Yunjeng. Jun remarks how she was even worse than Yonggi if you think about it. She's a delinquent who acted out with complete faith in how her father would back her up. But regardless, it was over as of today. She looks at him thinking what he meant by that. Then he proceeds to assure her, saying how his oppa will teach that delinquent a proper lesson. She laughs at him, saying he talks like a 40-year-old man. She was worried about him having to go up against Yoon's gangster father, but he told her not to worry about that. While he was leaving, She asked him if he was okay with her being a shaman's daughter while crying. He suddenly gets in front of her and reminds her what he had promised her. No matter what, he'd protect her. Whether it's a ghost or whatever else, he'll destroy everything. She believes him on that. As they were about to leave, she asked him for another favor. At the school's rooftop, Yoon orders him to apologize to her and to cancel the announcement that he made in front of the others. June couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. She threatened to call his father, and then the whole Tiger Skull gang would be onto him. All she needed to do was to just say the words and they'd invade the school. She advised him to think carefully, because even he won't be able to take on a whole gang just because he knows how to fight a little. She even threatens to take down Jae-hee with him. This pissed him off and he went from laughing to being a lunatic. He dared her to try it if she thought she could, calling her the B word. Yoon was trembling and got teary-eyed, but still continued to bluff. She keeps bringing up how he won't be able to stand against a whole gang. June smirks and asks her if she thought he wouldn't know. The truth is, the father she keeps bragging about, he's no different from a member who's been kicked out. Her eyes widen with shock. Her father's been the lowest ranking in the gang for the last 20 years, has gambling debt, and is even an alcoholic. So can she expect him to be scared of someone like that whom even the Tiger Skull gang treats as a pain in the ass? She asks him how he knew about that. He asks her if he should say all that in front of everyone. The father, who was such a cause of fear, was actually just a piece of trash about to be thrown out. She told him to shut up with a trembling voice and asked him if he was doing it because Jae-hee asked him to do it. He calls her pathetic, telling her what she actually asked him to do. We see that earlier when Jae-hee asked him for a favor, she requested him to forgive Yoon-jeng. He yelled at her, calling her stupid, saying how could she just let her be when she bullied her for years. Her logic was that Yoon must have had a similar situation to what she had with her mother. When she asks him if she has any proof, she tells him how she used to be cheerful and active in middle school, when they used to be good friends. But then she suddenly changed and started hanging out with bad people. She wanted to give Yoon another chance for her to return to her bright side and energetic self. And she wanted to become her friend again. But in the present, the little bit of sympathy June had for Yoon was gone. Even if she forgives her, he won't forgive a person like her. He remarks how a bee like her needed to learn a lesson physically. In trembling voice, she asked him what he was trying to do. He told her that he wouldn't let her go just because she was a girl. She threatens him to not hit her, to which he replies that some like her with no backing could do nothing. As he was about to her PTSD hit her, and she saw her abusive father in him. She got on her knee while crying, saying she did the wrong thing, and said not to hit her dad. Hearing this, June came to his senses. He asked her if she grew up getting hit by his father, while she just sat there, terrified. The next day at the school, after that incident, Jun Seok was in a bad mood. His classmates noticed it too and were scared he might lash out at them, but he could hear them tell them to shut up. He couldn't stop thinking about her after seeing her like that. He was feeling burdened. Just then, he hears Jae and the glasses guy talking about how Yoon didn't come to school that day. He asks her if they were talking about her and tells them that she might be acting sick to skip school. But Jae informed him that she had a condition ever since she was in middle school. She had anemia due to lack of hemoglobin. But June didn't believe her and said at least she wouldn't die. But she informed her that it could be bad if someone who was born with it received a shock. He asked her if she was accusing him. He acted as if he didn't care if he lived or died. But on the inside, he wondered if it was because of him. Then he remembers a flashback from his past life, where adult Yoon begged for his help while crying, saying they were still school friends. He denies how that wasn't his fault either, and also it hadn't even happened in this life yet. Just then, he hears the angel's voice, who asks him if his earnest repentance was only worth that much. He is shocked to hear its voice after all this time, and realizes he'd been watching him all this time during his second life, to check where he was repenting earnestly. But even now, he sticks to his decision, saying the angel can get effed, and that there was nothing wrong with a rude delinquent like her learning a lesson. Even though he says all that, he is already at Yoon's house. Seeing where she lived, he realized her situation was even worse than his. Just then, his drunk father comes out of the house and asks him who he is. When he asks him if it was Yoon's house, he lashes out at him saying it was his house. Then he just wandered off while drinking. When he entered the house, he found Yoon sitting in the corner while breathing heavily. She was shocked to see him there and shouted at him to get out of the house. This makes her situation even worse and she passes out immediately. He tries to get her to come back to her senses, but he realizes her situation is way more serious than he had thought. Just then, her father arrives there and yells at him for entering his house, calling him a thief. As he is spouting nonsense, June punches him in anger. But the guy was still standing and attacked him. But this time June attacked him with more power, and knocked him down. He told him how he had no right to call himself a father. Her only daughter was writhing in pain, and this piece of crap was drinking and laying hands on her. He picked her up to take her to the hospital. As he was just on his way to the hospital, someone said to him how he was already cheating on her girl. This was Sun-soo, who reminded him that it wasn't the first time they were meeting. June didn't understand why the top dog of the Tiger Skull gang was at low life of Tiger Skull gang. This couldn't be a coincidence, he thinks to himself. Seeing the old man knocked out, Soon accuses him of barging into someone else's house and even taking away their daughter. In an angry voice, Soon asks him if he has any idea who he just punched. June called him a low-life pathetic gangster who didn't have the right to be called father. June was tense, thinking he might have to get into another fight. Soon looks at him in anger, but seeing Yoon's situation, he tells him to go. He knows he is taking her to the hospital. They'd settle the other stuff when he's back from the hospital. In the meantime, he'd take care of the old man. June agrees to that while giving him an angry look. After he was gone, Soon thought to himself that even if the old man had gotten old and weak, even then, a high schooler who could knock out an active gangster wasn't something to be ignored. He wondered who he was. He admitted her to the hospital. The nurse told him that it could have gotten way worse if he hadn't taken her there when he did. But her immune system was still very weak, so they needed to be very cautious in the future. In a flashback, we see June and other gang members partying at a club. They were celebrating because they had just taken over Tiger Skull gang. His partner, who would eventually betray him in the future, praises him, calling him the action man of Sempo High. Just then, the adult June grabbed his hand and asked him if he remembered her and that they went to the same school. June gets angry and asks the manager about her. He informs him that she sold to them when they took over the Tiger Skull. She was one of the gangster's daughters who died before paying his debt. Yoon begs him to take her out of there and that she'll do whatever he asked her to do. But this annoyed the hell out of him and he pushed her back, saying he didn't remember a bar girl like her. He further goes on to order the manager to make her come out for work every single day, without any rest. All of the guys from their gang who come there would be served by her too. Instead of helping her, he made her already hard life a living hell. And all of that just because she annoyed him. After that day, he didn't hear about her. But there was no way she had an easy life after that day. She probably lived miserably and died while working all day long. He wondered if something like that would have happened again if he were to drop out of high school, and if she'd had to go through all those horrible situations again. The nurse asks him about her guardian and payment for the treatment, but he didn't have money. Just then, Soon came there, and he'd already paid for the treatment. Soon inquires about her situation. June asks him if her deadbeat father is still alive. Soon says that no matter how useless that old man was, he had to take care of him because he was family. June thinks back about how the guy was the best among the higher-ups of the Tiger Skull gang, but he had to take care of the lowest of the gang himself. After all of this was settled now, he asked for June's name while taking off his watch. June asks why he wanted to know his name. He hits him out of nowhere, saying he needed to make sure to teach the high schooler who arrogantly laid a hand on a gangster a lesson. June didn't see that coming and was surprised, but he doesn't retaliate, saying if it was all he cared about while giving him an angry gaze. Soon was impressed seeing him act that way even though he knew he was. He wasn't getting scared, nor was he coming at him out of rage. He was suppressing his anger instead. He started laughing, saying how he liked him and he was an interesting guy. While leaving, he asks June to look after Yoon as she is in a difficult situation right now. He calls him by his name, which catches him off guard. But then he realizes he was wearing his name tag. He thinks to himself how Sung-soo is a better guy than he'd thought. But he was still just a gangster. While coming back home, he realizes that the angel was making him meet all the people he mistreated in his past life, and was watching whether he was repenting of his sins earnestly. But he yells that he'd repent his way, using his fist and his mouth because that's all he had. He was going to hell anyway, so he'd live his life virtuously on his own. The neighbors yell at him to shut up. We see the angel, who was wearing a uniform, watching over him, saying he'd watch over him a little longer. The next day, while June was getting ready to go to school, his father said how he had pain in his shoulder. June again advised him to not go to work, but he didn't listen to him. June asked him if he should drop out of school and get a job. He wasn't that smart anyway. His father gives him a smack to the head and tells him to stop spouting nonsense. He told him to just attend school wholeheartedly and asked him if he was going around hitting others. At first June denies it, and then he remembers what he has been doing all this time and starts fumbling with his words. His father tries to interrogate him, but he runs away before that. While going to school, he wonders if Yoon is all right now. He dreams about how she is going to thank him. After all, he carries her to the hospital. When he gets to her class, He finds her devastated and asks her classmate how long she has been like that. She has been like that since she arrived at the school. He asks her if she has something to say to him, expecting some words of gratitude, but instead, she told him to get off and not to involve himself with her anymore. He is annoyed at her, but then he sees her crying and leaves, saying he should have expected that from her. She blames him for ruining his life. Before him, no one was able to lay a hand on her. On top of that, he even saw her in such a pitiful state. She was certain he'd use that weakness against her. Just then her friends greeted her, inquired about her health. She was surprised and asked them if they still gonna be her friends. They took her to the rooftop for fresh air, while someone was watching them. On the rooftop, she was relieved that everything was still the same. She plans to get her revenge on Jun by luring him to the people who had their eye on him. That way, she might be able to get her revenge on him. Just then, the girls give a signal to each other and lock the door. She turns to look when someone pushes her, saying his hands just slipped. They were delinquents from the other classes. She was terrified to see them and asked them what they were doing. She tried to threaten him with her dad's name, but they were not buying her bluff anymore, because she couldn't do anything when Jun Seok hid her in front of everyone. They found out that she'd been lying for years now. Now that her bluff was exposed, she wouldn't be able to do anything no matter what they did to her. She asked her friends for help, but they also changed sides after learning the truth and advised her to just pay the price of lying to them for all this time. She wasn't trying to lie. She didn't want her family life to be exposed. As they were about to lay their hands on her, she started crying loudly. They tell her that there was no use even if she screamed, as they had locked the door. But just then, the door behind them opened. They were terrified. They were sure to lock the door. It was none other than Jun, who was disgusted by them and was fuming with anger. The delinquent says that he was the one who decided to bully her, and that there was nothing wrong with playing with the delinquent like that. Jun grabbed him by the throat and said how they crawl whenever someone stronger than them appears. But now that she was easygoing, they were having their way with her. He remarks how just because he announced her to be a loner, doesn't give them a reason to do whatever they want with her. He ordered them to announce it in the school that if anyone laid a hand on Yoonjang, he'd kill them himself. They ran off immediately. After they were gone, she asked him why he was doing all this, and if it was all fun for her. She told him to just go away, to which he replies that he didn't care whatever happened to someone like her. He was only doing this because Jae-hee asked him. She was surprised at her and asked why she was doing this when she even said all those things about her. Jun calls her pitiful and informs her when she is acting like a delinquent to cover up her family situation. She is worrying for her right from the start. Jae-hee told her that she was hard after she did all those things to her. But what hurt her more was that she wasn't able to hang out with her childhood friends, just like they did in junior high. She says how she'll be more courageous and try harder so that they can be friends like they were back then. Yoon was speechless and realized what she was doing all this time, and started crying. Jun was relieved because at least for now he had rectified all the faults that he could think of off the top of his head. He thought he should be able to live peacefully for the time being, but he had no idea how wrong he was and what was waiting for him.